Before we begin this episode, I'm getting a phone call. I will call them back later.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a brand new episode of Two Please. I'm your host, Abhin.
And I'm your co-host Rohit.
So, before we begin the episode, I want to just take a minute and ask you guys to like and follow the podcast wherever you're listening to it or wherever you're watching it. It really benefits us given how stringent tech companies are becoming with the automatic downloads, especially even with YouTube. YouTube is quite notorious for making sure content gets suppressed if it's not generating the right amount of views. So it would be super helpful if you could just, like I said, like, share, and follow the podcast and subscribe to the channel. It really does us a world of good so we can keep putting out good content for you guys on a consistent basis. That's all I had to say. Rohit, what are we talking about today, my friend?
So we're going to go back to our thematic approach. We're taking a break from single movie episodes. This is like a very vague episode topic, to be honest, right? We're calling it must-see movies. But again, must-see movies are very subjective.
Yeah.
What's must-see for Abhin and I may not be for you. But I think we've tried to like pick out movies that are fairly objectively good, and we've also tried to have a good mix of genres, some comedy, some is there any horror? No, you took the horror out, but some whatever
Oh.
mix of comedy and serious stuff. And we've tried to have a decent spread of geographies, languages as well.
All right. So before we begin this episode, I just need to back up Rohit's point. This is no way the IMDb top 250 list. Like, we are not going to be talking about the Shawshank Redemption, Godfather, Schindler's List. Those, we know those are objectively good movies. I'm not saying that's what this episode is going to be about. This episode is going to be about good films, but these have more to do with personal choices. And I'm sure that if this episode resonates with a lot of you, and if you come back to us with like a commenter's edition of movies you think are personally must watches, we'll do an episode on that as well. We're fluid like that.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a good place to start. Again, we're going back to the old format of 3v3. Rohit, do you want to kick us off, or should I take lead on this one?
Okay, let me start with my first movie, right? Which
Mm.
is the 2007 movie called The Man from Earth, directed by Michael, I can't pronounce his surname, Schenkman. Yeah, sorry, Richard Schenkman.
Mm.
Uh, and Based on a short story written by the sci-fi author Jerome Bixby. For those of you who don't know who Jerome Bixby is, he's written quite a few fairly influential short stories, some of which have been adapted into Star Trek episodes. Probably the most famous of them being the A Requiem for Methuselah. And it's the same idea that sort of was built upon or developed into the short story that eventually became The Man from Earth, which in turn was adapted for the stage and then for the movie. So what the plot of the movie basically is, it's about this guy called John Oldman, who is a professor at this university. And at the start of the movie, it's established that this guy has been at this university for 10ish years, and he's looking
Mm.
to move on. He's looking to go to a different place, change of job, change of scenery, all of that. And his colleagues and friends have come to see him off at his house, right? They're helping him do the last of his packing and stuff. And uh, it's a way of saying goodbye and, farewell and stuff like that. Conversations begin to take place about where he's been, where he's going. And the good bit is, because he works in a university and his friends come from diverse scholastic backgrounds, you have somebody that represents history, somebody that represents biology, somebody that represents anthropology. So you have a variety of thought in the room. And
Mm.
as and when the story unfolds, you start to see how each of these people approach the situation, right? We will be doing spoilers. I'll try not to give like the very biggest of the spoilers, but by and large we will. So essentially, what John Oldman reveals to this group is that he's not just a man who's in his 40s. He's closer to, as he mentions, 14,000 years old. He was born in the Paleolithic era, and he has some sort of condition that essentially has stopped him from aging beyond whatever he looks like. He's in his 30s or early 40s, right? So he's sort of
Mm.
stuck at that age. And at the outset, obviously, room full of scientific skeptics. Each of them approach it in their own way. They try to like poke holes in his story. He tells them how for the first few years he was um, sort of living as a caveman. Then he was a Sumerian for 2,000 years. Then he passed off as a Babylonian. Then he came to the East to study under the Buddha. And then obviously as the story progresses, the big reveal here again, like this is mega spoiler, so if you guys want to skip the next 30 seconds, please feel free. But the major reveal is when he mentions that after having learned from the Buddha, he travels back west into the Roman Empire to teach the whatever the message of Buddha, and he sort of reveals that he is the inspiration for the Jesus story, and he says the whole idea of Jesus Christ essentially came from the fact that I was going around spreading these teachings.
Wow.
So yeah, again, it's thematically the anyway, to sort of complete the plot, right? All of this happens. Some people believe him. Some people are disgusted by what they
I
think
hear
is
you.
a very insensitive hoax that he's sort of crafting. This is in essence the plot of the movie, right? And what I really love about this movie is that while thematically it is very vast, right? It talks about some guy who's lived for 14,000 years, and he has seen essentially the rise of humankind as we know it, right? Because agriculture sort of came into practice in 10,000 BC. So like society as we know it is 12,000 years old. So this guy has been there. I mean, forget prehistory. He's been
Hmm.
pre-formation of society. He's seen the
So it,
hunter-gatherer life. So he's seen the evolution of society up until the modern era. Thematically very vast. They talk about religion. They talk about science. They talk about the implications, the psychological implications of having lived that long, and what it does to a person to see everyone around him die eventually, right?
hmm.
uh, the film tackles all of these vast themes, but what is really fascinating is the way the screenplay is constructed. All of this, it's almost like a bottle episode of a movie, right? All of this is taking place merely in the form of conversations in that one
Hmm.
room, his house, right? It's a small cabin that he lives in. So such a thematically vast movie, all of it playing out in the form of a conversation. You don't feel cheated out of the scope of imagination because the dialogue is crafted really well. There's no scene cutaways to any special effects. There's no flashback. Literally, it's just these room full of people talking to each other, and in the process, such a great vast storyline is such a great vast yarn is sort of stitched together, right? So
Hmm.
very I have not seen this sort of movie out there. It's a very different experience. The first half an hour might feel a little slow to you until it builds up to, once you get a grip of the fact that hey, this is the core conceit of the film, that this really old guy is telling us about his life. You might be a little thrown off by the fact that hey, it's just a bunch of people talking. It's very 12 Angry Men-esque in that sense.
Hmm.
Even that movie doesn't really. They talk about events, but save for the first scene in the courtroom and probably the last verdict scene, it's all in one room, right? So,
Hmm.
Man from Earth is very similar to that. They
It's
do
in a
not cut
room.
away from the room at all. It's literally in one
Hmm.
room, people just talking. So when he tells them he's whatever 14,000 years old, they're all trying to poke holes from their point of view, right? There's an anthropological point of view. There's a some the biologist is like, how is that even possible? Don't your cells age? The
Hmm.
historian is like, hey, but uh, so were you here at this event? Is this what happened? He's trying to like cross verify with his own knowledge, right? And
Hmm.
uh, there is a part where I remember John says, "Look, you need to understand. I might be old, but I'm not omniscient. So if I don't
Hmm.
know things that when I was in Sumer, maybe something happened in India. If I don't know that, doesn't mean I didn't exist. It's just I'm not God." So he
Yeah.
very clearly wants to make that distinction. That longevity in this case does not mean he is all powerful, and he didn't
Hmm.
choose this life, right? It just seems that he's sort of burdened with this immortality. So
Yeah. It has
it's a
this that
very
age
very
old.
fascinating thought experiment.
It's like I think a lot of similar character traits appear in other forms of media as well. The most specific being I mean, the one example that came to mind was Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen, where he watches
Yes.
his wife age, and she gets progressively more upset the more he ages, and the more she ages, and he just stays the same. And then he's able to be present across the past, present, and the future, and that just hollows him out as a person. He's this, I mean, he is more of a godlike entity. I'm not saying there's the comparison is the same, is exactly the same with regards to the man from Earth, but definitely there's a similarity with the question of immortality, and if it's really worth it watching the people you love around you either going out of your lives, or passing away while you stay the same. It's an interesting, and while we as a civilization uh, per, pursue many methods to elongate our own lives, it kind of really questions uh, the idea
E-
of.
Exactly. I mean, it's fundamental nature to not want to let go, right? Because we don't really know what is after death. Nobody knows,
Yeah,
right?
no one knows. Yeah.
Uh, Contrary to as many claims as the people want to make, nobody really knows. So it's natural to not want to face the unknown. But I do agree with the larger message, which is that immortality probably is a curse, right? Because why do we love vacations? Because they're special because they eventually end. If your
And yeah.
life was perennially a vacation, it would start seeming like it would lose its color, it would lose its charm. Our life has meaning because it is fleeting. If you
Mhm.
don't die, then eventually, maybe the mileage varies for each of us, but eventually we're all going to reach the point where we're just begging for the sweet release of death, right?
Death, exactly.
So, very, very pertinent theme played out in a very interesting thought experiment in the form of the screenplay. So, for those of you who haven't checked out, I'd strongly recommend you do. In fact, this movie got its legs not so much in the theater circuit because it's like, I think it's got like 100K production budget. It's
Hmm.
not from a major studio. It's just a bunch of dudes who decided to come together and make a movie. Like I said, it's very small budget movie. It got its legs in the peer-to-peer sharing and piracy
Hmm.
networks, right? So this is back in the days of LimeWire, even pre the Pirate Bay, and now obviously
Hmm.
piracy has really gotten people to download this movie, watch it. So you may not find it on any of the streaming platforms. It's a movie that really flies under the radar, but
Mhm.
I won't tell you how to get it. But if you can get your hands on it, I would definitely recommend you
It,
watch it.
like it's there. Like you just need to find it.
Yeah, it's
The
there.
internet, it's spread somewhere.
Yep.
But yeah, quickly changing gears from the Man from Earth, let's go on to my pick. So my pick is more recent, and this comes more from a personal bias because I want people to go watch this movie, because movies like this don't get made often, and I am now taking us back to Bollywood. So it's for those around me, and I haven't really mentioned this on the podcast. 2023 for me was a very disappointing year from a Bollywood perspective. There are maybe three good films that have come out last year, in my opinion. I am yet to see Animal. I have no hopes of it, even though it is to release on Republic Day on Netflix. But
No, no.
as I think the ones that 12th fail with Vikrant Massey was supposed to be quite good. Sam Bahadur starring Vicky Kaushal is supposed to be again quite good.
Hmm.
Rocky Arani is the and Prem Khani is the quintessential commercial pot boiler, so it has some novelty there. But I was, for the most part, very disappointed with the fare that Bollywood churned out last year. I wasn't a big fan of the two big Shah Rukh releases. I watched them in theater, that being Patan and Jawan, but I wasn't a big fan of of them. Donkey, I am yet to see, although I've been told it's not up to the standard either, which is quite sad given Shah Rukh and Raju Hirani. But I was completely taken aback by this film that I saw as of last week, just a week prior to recording this episode,
So
which
I'm
is
guessing for
Sriram
this one
Raghavan's.
we shouldn't do spoilers.
Yeah, definitely. There will be no spoilers for this one. So because I want people to go watch it, I want you to go watch it because
I
this
will.
was a
I will.
movie I was going to bypass entirely. And this is Sriram Raghavan's Merry Christmas, starring Katrina Kaif and Vijay Sethupathi. The problem with this film, and I'm going to like address it's the biggest concern with it, is the title. Yes, the title of the film is the centerpiece to the plot, but it's very misguiding to the average viewer who has no idea what this movie is about. like I know who Sriram Raghavan is, so which is why I will go watch the movie. I was that's how that was the pitch to me. Like I had a friend who said, "You want to go for the film?" And I said, "Sure." I mean, who's in it? And he told me the actors, and then when he mentioned Sriram Raghavan as the director, I said, "Cool, I'm in."
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm just gonna quickly interlude here. I was just gonna make the same point, right? There are probably two or three directors for me where I'm like, if this guy or this person is directing, I am ready to go into the movie blind. Like Anurag
yeah.
Kashyap till recently was on the list. Now it's very hit or miss with even him. But Shyam Raghavan is like, oh, Shyam Raghavan movie, cool. I'm ready to go in blind. Let's do this.
So Sriram Raghavan is probably the best noir director we've had in quite some time. Most of
Absolutely.
his films are supremely well done. So you've got, like, even if you were to go back, I think he did the original documentary on Raman Raghav back in the 90s before he
Hmm.
made his feature film debut with Ek Hasina Thi. Then he did Johnny Gaddar, and then I think there's an agent Vinod in there somewhere. But he's done Badlapur and
Amazing
Andhadhun,
again.
which people really liked. And I'm not the biggest fan of, but I really like everything up to the last 20 minutes. This
Hmm.
I was a very big fan of, not because of the twists and turns that it provides, but because of how the film is structured. Now, the story of Merry Christmas is set on Christmas Eve, and it's about this guy called Albert who's just come back from Dubai to collect things from his mother's old apartment in Bombay. It's set in the 90s. And he meets his landlord or his neighbor, and they welcomes him back, and he just walks around the neighborhood trying to get a grasp of how things have changed. And he goes into a restaurant where a man meets him in a bathroom and tells him that he's on a date, but the date didn't tell him that she has a daughter, so he wants to leave. And that woman happens to be Katrina Kaif. So Albert goes to sits down at the table next to her, and then they strike up a conversation. And she eventually takes him home, and that's where things take off. Now, that's all I'll say about the film, and it it's such a fun ride. I was rooted to my seat for the entirety of the film. I was always trying to deduce what was happening, how it was happening, what the main play was, because each of these characters, they all reveal very little of themselves as the movie starts, and as it progresses, you start to see more of what lies beneath. Like classic noir fashion, I think if Johnny Gaddar was James Hadley Chase, Merry Christmas is Raymond Chandler. So
Interesting.
you can, yeah, like there's a direct nod to Raymond Chandler because he pulls out a short story book in the film, and I was like, oh, okay, so I can see where your influences are. Now, for Raymond Chandler, for those of you who don't know, has written one of the biggest noir films of all time called The Big Sleep, starring Humphrey Bogart, if I'm not mistaken. The definitive noir films in the genre. Raymond Chandler had a big part to play in both. So this film was such a fun ride. It's 2.5 hours long, but it does not feel it. It is wonderfully paced. It has a very interesting use of a piece of classical music, which in my wildest dreams I thought would never make an appearance in a Bollywood film, but it does. Because as soon as I heard the opening notes, and I was just like, "Huh, okay," and then it has a very integral part to play in the plot as well. So I highly recommend you check it out because not a lot of people are watching this film. I think by the time I got to it in theaters, it was a Thursday night and it was relatively full, and it was purely down to word of mouth. I think this movie is produced by Netflix, so eventually it will come to Netflix, much like everything else.
Hmm.
But if you have the opportunity to watch this in a movie theater, I highly recommend you do.
I want to. I just
Hmm.
it's not a question of intent. It's a question of
Timing.
capability. I need to, yeah, and I need to figure out when I can do it. But I definitely want to. And on your point on of the use of music in Sriram Raghavan's films, my favorite by far scene in Andhadhun is when he's playing the piano and stuff happens in the background. There's no dialogue and he's just playing the piano and you're just watching things go all the way to 11 in just that like 2 minute scene, right? So I'm
Mhm.
just excited off of just you saying, hey, there's some musical element to this film. I'm just like, hey, is he going to pull that off again? Part of me is like, am I going to see something similar? So
It's
I'm already excited.
yeah, it definitely is such a fun watch and great chemistry between. I mean, you would have never ever thought Vijay Sethupathi and Katrina Kaif were a great pair on screen, but they have wonderful chemistry and they really
I mean,
pull good
Vijay
performances out of
Sethupathi,
the
I
film.
can understand. He's a great actor, right? I'm just
Mm.
concerned, like, does Katrina act? I don't think she's a good actress or actor.
Yeah, but this is her career best, if you were to ask me. And I have seen a lot of Katrina films. This is
Fair.
probably her career best performance, and she's good. She's pretty damn good in the film. There are other characters. I don't want to reveal who else is in the film,
Fair
but
enough.
this is a
Wait, so
movie I
Vijay Sethupathi
recommend.
plays Albert.
He's Albert. He's the
Okay.
lead, and Katrina Kaif is the date he runs into.
Nice. I think you've set it up quite well.
Mhm.
I will definitely try and make an attempt to watch it in theaters because I think noir is one of those genres that benefits from a big screen experience, markedly so, right, over watching it at home.
Mm.
So I will try.
Yeah,
And for anyone listening, if you can, just because it's Sriram Raghavan, I'll also endorse what I've been saying. Please go watch it. Give this man your
yeah.
money.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like give good directors money. If people are putting out nice stories, well crafted stories, please give them money. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we get stuck with some rehashed nonsense that no
Like
one is
Pathan and the
ever.
Jawans and the bullshit of the world.
Fighter. I don't even know. Siddharth Anand needs someone needs to stop giving that guy. Oh, never mind. I'm going to stop
Yeah.
ranting. That's a rant for another episode.
Great. So let's move on to my second film, which is the 2010 British comedy Four Lions, directed by Chris Morris. I can see, Abhin, you're already laughing, uh, going back to, remembering scenes from the movie, right?
No, I remember the one character that shows up at the end of the film that is now a megastar.
Yeah,
So
I mean, we
mm,
will talk about it. I don't
yeah.
want to like keep it under wraps. We
Mm,
will talk about it. So before I jump the gun, so what Four Lions is about is about these four British Muslims who are aspiring terrorists, right? I'm not making a mistake. That's exactly what they are. They're aspiring terrorists. They're disenfranchised British Muslims who, in their eyes, have valid reasons to want to, take on the establishment, and they want to do something about it, right? They want to be very political terrorists. Right off
yeah.
the bat, the premise is it's hilarious, it's bizarre, it's all of that. And what makes it funnier is throughout the course of the movie, they continue to suck at being terrorists, right? Like these guys suck at being terrorists. There's a whole section of the movie where two of them, Riz Ahmed's character and Kevan Novak's character, are sent to this undisclosed. I think it's Pakistan. I think
Pakistan,
they are
right?
sent
Yeah,
to
they go to
Pakistan
Pakistan. Yeah.
for
Mm,
a terrorist training camp where they are so out of place because they don't realize it, but we can see it. They are these privileged. Essentially, they're like white Muslims, right? In fact, one of the
yeah,
four is a white guy who's a convert.
yeah.
He's a
Hassan
British,
Al
like
Brittani.
Hassan Al Brittani, yeah,
Yeah,
Hassan Al Brittani, which is the name he's given himself, right?
himself.
And he obviously to overcompensate posits himself as the most radical of the four, right? And he's never fully accepted by the other three because they're like, hey, you're a white dude at the end of the day, right?
Mm,
So anyway, so these two go to Pakistan. They have a disastrous time in the training camp, which that whole sequence or that whole section of the movie is capped off with what for me is the funniest by far part of the film, where they need to they're trying to shoot down a drone with a missile launch. They
Before
don't
before
know
he even gets there, right? Like they're praying in the morning and they're praying in the wrong direction.
direction.
And the
And
guy's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Mecca's that way, brother."
साइड पे देखे इधर fuck off bro east is that way आप इधर नमाज पढ़े that way is east bro मुझे मालूम है it's that way is east
we've flown over Mecca now.
fucking gone mental bro Mecca's in the east yeah where the sun where it rises your bench short fucking prong
it's just insane. So while all of this hilarity is playing out on screen, subliminally the movie does land the message that, you know what, their execution of it might be flawed, but there is some kernel of truth to their disenfranchisement, and the fact that the way it plays out in the end, right? It simultaneously manages to show why these people feel repressed or disconnected from, or why these people yearn for a better life for themselves, and how they feel, you know, blowing something up to their minds makes sense. Yet at the same time, you can see them realize, especially Riz Ahmed's character towards the end, realizes the futility of their actions, right? And they start questioning whether this is the right approach to putting the message out there. And the movie does a beautiful job of balancing both ends with sensitivity, right? Yes, it pokes fun
Mm.
at their actions. It never pokes fun at their intentions. If you
Yeah.
observe the movie, at no point is like their motivations are stupid. These are just stupid people to with motivations that to them feel genuine, right? So
Hmm.
towards the end of the movie, it leaves you with a thought that, hey, maybe we need to understand them a little better. Maybe we need to make them feel a little less alienated. There is, we are to some degree responsible for the way they feel. That said, the movie's fucking hilarious, right? Especially again, the cameo that we wanted to talk about. So towards the end, when Waj, who has a bomb strapped to him, is holding this chicken shop, whatever, like this
Yeah, kebab
KFC
shop guy. Yeah.
equivalent hostage. They send Benedict Cumberbatch as the negotiator, who has a very, I think it's like a 2 minute or a 5 minute role, where he's
Uh,
the negotiator and he's trying to relate to Waj, right? So he's like Waj. He just asks about him, where he's from. He's like, aren't you an ass man, Waj? He's trying to relate to him on like what his sexual preferences are. And he takes it too far. He's like, I knew you were an ass man. You were an ass man. And then Waj is like, bro, I'm not like,
mm,
I'm still into women or whatever.
mm.
I can't explain the way that just that scene plays out. It's you're just this is one of the movies where I have had stomach aches, multiple stomach aches through the course of watching it.
I think for me personally, there are two moments that stand out. One is obviously Adil Akhtar's shop situation, where they ask him how you hid your face, and what he does. I'll put the scene here for those of you who haven't seen it. Like, you have to see it.
You got a beard. I covered it. You covered your beard? Yeah. How?
Because it's so stupid. This was the first one of the first few things I'd seen of Four Lions, because it was doing the festival routes back then, and probably 2010, right? This movie came out.
2010.
This
Yeah.
was the first time I was paying attention to what festival films were like, what Sundance was like, and I knew this was creating a buzz in that circuit. And that one scene stood out to me, so I was looking for it. And the sidekick they hire, what's his name?
Hassan.
Has,
Hassan
has
is the
his whole show in at the conference where he starts rapping.
And the Mujahideen, and I'm making a scene. Now you're gonna feel what the boom boom means.
This such a fun film. It also introduced me to Top Loaders, Dancing in the Moonlight, which plays a huge. I mean, it's a cover, but
yeah.
it plays such a huge part in the film.
Dancing
If
in
you
the
haven't,
moonlight.
yeah, if you haven't seen Four Lions, I highly recommend it. It's biting commentary on extremism, which I
I
think.
forgot this other moment, sorry, which is
Mm,
when they're trying to get stuff that unload the van, and so Barry's told them they're being watched, and
mm.
somebody's taking photos of them. Barry's told him you need to keep moving your head so they can't get a clear image of you. And then Riz Ahmed's character is helping them unload. He just looks at these two doing this, and he's like, "What are you guys doing?"
Just in case they're taking pictures.
What? Barry says you come out blurry.
Stop it! Stop it!
He's like, surveillance is video. You guys look like a couple of Sufis on speed. When I heard that, who wrote this line? Couple of Sufis on speed. It is like layered and brilliant writing. It's really good. It's really funny.
But yeah, let's. That was Four Lions. We'll quickly move on to mine, and mine. Let's jump back. Let's stay in Hollywood. So this is a well-known film. I think this is a movie that it it got its lead and Oscar nomination, and it is written by possibly one of the best writers working today, Aaron Sorkin. So directed by Danny Boyle. This is Steve Jobs. Not the Jobs movie starring Ashton Kutcher, but the other one, the one which takes place between three press conferences. This isn't a biopic, and it really bucks the traditional biopic trend by showcasing the life of one person set across three major events. The first is, I believe, during the launch of the Macintosh. The second conference is when Steve Jobs is about to launch Next. And the third is during the launch of the iPod, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, definitely during the launch of the iPod. No, it's not the iPod. I'm sorry. It's during the launch of the Macintosh, the blue PC. This is possibly my favorite Aaron Sorkin film from a script
What?
perspective.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, from the Social Network is still up there. Like the Social Network
Yes.
is up there. But in terms of the the screenplay and the dialogue and how Danny Boyle executes it, it's so riveting. Like it you could make the argument it's 2 hours of dudes and women yelling at each other.
There are more people who can tell you about the ad than can tell you who won the game.
I understand, but the ad said the Mac was gonna save the world. It didn't say it was gonna say hello.
Showed a lot of happy people drinking Pepsi. We didn't say the world was going to end if you bought a Dr. Pepper.
The least you can do if you're going to downsize these people
They're gonna live in the biggest houses of anyone on the
is
unemployment
to
line.
acknowledge them.
That could very well be a valid criticism, but it's what they're talking about and what these conversations are pulling out. You see a man who is so hell-bent on his vision for perfection and for supremacy that he just starts to treat the people around him like shit, and it doesn't even affect him much until the end. Like when it begins, he threatens to have one of the lead engineers fired because the demo won't say hello. He makes some offhanded comments about his estranged wife and refuses to take custody of his daughter, knowing full well that she is in fact his daughter. Then he has this whole confrontation with Jeff Daniels. I think Jeff Daniels, who plays the ex Pepsi CEO, I forget his name, and he was brought into Apple to help boost sales, and he and Steve Jobs had a massive falling out that led to Jobs being fired from the company. But there's a scene where he comes back later, and Jeff Daniels and him have a confrontation, and it's so damn good.
The quorum call was a homicide.
Right there. That's the part that's bullshit, my friend. It was a suicide. Because you knew your cards, and I showed you mine. And you did it anyway.
Jeff Daniels was made for Aaron Sorkin material. I think he even does his Broadway production of Mockingbird. Of course, The Newsroom is what everyone knows. But he is so damn good in that film. I think if there was an award contender that was considered a snub, that his role possibly had it. I think Scully is his what? John Scully is the name of the CEO. Similarly, Seth Rogen is very good in this film. So is Michael Fassbender. Seth Rogen bounces back and forth of Michael Fassbender as he tries to get Steve Jobs to acknowledge the Apple II team, and Steve Jobs is like, "That's the past. Fuck it. I have nothing to do with it." And a lot of it is fictitious. I think a big chunk of it is taken from Walt Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs. But a lot of it is obviously dramatized for effect. It could very well have been a play as well. It is a masterclass in screenwriting. There's one line that sticks out like a sore thumb, which is a Beatles reference. It particularly didn't fall well with me, but this is a movie that is tense, doesn't have and it's purely conversational. It takes place in 3 separate rooms, and much like The Man from Earth, and it really highlights the flaws of megalomaniacs, of people who think that the people around them are just a means to an end.
Interesting. I'm glad you clarified that. That was going to be my first question, right? Is this the sort of film that portrays Steve Jobs in a positive light? Because if so, then I would never have any interest in watching it, right? He was an outright piece of shit, and I'm glad that the narrative about him has finally, it took for him to fucking die until people could finally be comfortable with coming around and saying, yeah, he was a piece of shit. And like you rightly said, right, having the right vision, or which again, yes, it did bear out in quite a few cases, but having the right vision does not justify the way he treated people. There is no reason why the same results could not be achieved with just a little bit more compassion, right? And to be fair, this is my opinion. People are welcome to feel differently, call me uninformed, call me an idiot. Fair enough. I would be the first one to say maybe I don't have enough information. But a lot of Apple's success need not be directly attributed to him, right? People talk about how his design inputs really made Apple the company it is today, but what about Jonathan Ives, right? He is the guy who was in the studios designing the product. It's very easy for someone to just give broad direction and then walk away and then call themselves a visionary, right? Visions are great, but only if they're executed. I think what really works in Apple's favor is in Wozniak, in Ives, and in the huge number of nameless people that Apple did a good job hiring. They had a great execution machine, and we have seen when Apple does get it wrong, right? The last couple of probably iPhone models have not brought that quantum jump, and which is only fair. You can't really have quantum jumps every year, right?
Yeah.
So they seem to have sort of plateaued out in terms of what new they can offer. And the irony being, I'm now saying this while I'm on a Mac myself, right? It's the new whatever A2 chip one. It looks good. It looks whatever. But when I look at this machine and I'm like, the probable number of people who had to undergo abuse for me to sit and use this machine, is probably not worth it, right? You could have had the same result, just being a little nicer to people. And again, very assholeish thing to say, but Jobs got his comeuppance when he died of a totally avoidable reason. If he had not been an ass about eating his fruitarian diet, he could have.
He could
But
have been cured.
at
I
least,
mean,
at
yeah,
least, exactly. At least it shows consistency, right? It's the same stubbornness with which he pursued his design visions, which he applied. His complete and utter belief that, hey, what I know or what I believe is unquestionably right, even in the face of very obvious signs of deterioration and the cancer spreading. At least he was consistent in his stupidity.
I think Jobs is, and this is far from me to judge a man who has who basically kickstarted a trillion-dollar organization, but he is very much what you'd call a marketing genius, because he didn't know how to code, and they allude to this in the film, that he he understood human psychology, that people would pay through the nose for exclusivity. There's a conversation earlier on in the film where Steve Wozniak and him are having a conversation, and he tells Steve Wozniak that you wanted to make it this plug and play system where you could add multiple boards, and I shut that down because I wanted to be a closed system, so it maintains its exclusivity.
There is a high degree of confirmation bias, or sorry, not what's the bias I'm looking for? Where we talk about success cases. There are probably 100 other companies who try to build or leverage exclusivity and try to build their brand on it and failed spectacularly, right? Like,
Yeah.
what are the successes we know of? Apple is probably the most famous one. But here in India, we have Cred. Cred has also built its whole model on, hey, only the select few can enter. It's also very easy for if that message to land wrongly and for people to be put off by what seems to be very high-handed elitist behavior and reject your proposition altogether, right? uh, Apple seems to keep getting away with it, although now with their whole pig-headedness on connectors and all of those protocols, they seem to be getting whipped into shape, especially in the EU. People have sort
Yeah.
of had enough of Apple deciding to do things their own way and for everyone else to get with the program. So it need not always work, right? So if people take that message away from the story of Apple, I feel that's a dangerous message to take away. I also sort of feel Apple succeeded almost in spite of Jobs. That's how I feel, right? Not because of him.
I think
But that said,
what happened was, prior to him coming back, they went through a really bad period where they launched this thing that looked like a calculator. They launched a bunch of really hit or miss products, but what catapulted them to fame was during his time at Next, he had created what we now know as the Mac OS, and but he didn't have a system capable enough to house it. But Apple had the resources, so he sold them Next, came back in as CEO, and then the blue iMac was born, and the iMac catapulted them to fame. And then suddenly, when they were on top of their game, came the iPod, and that revolutionized music, because up until
yeah.
then the Walkman was what you would run around, and then somebody came to you and say, hey dude, dude, I can store 3,000 songs in this piece of music, and there's no cassette and there's no CD involved. It was a game changer.
No, I
And
agree. I
similarly,
agree.
yeah, 7 years down the line, I mean, yeah, 6 years down the line came the iPhone, revolutionized smartphone, and the smartphone as well. I don't think they have enough leverage to have succeeded on their uh, I mean, to have the kind of bragging rights that they currently do have. The MacBook Air, I much like you, I use a MacBook Air, and there is no way in hell a system as compact as this should be able to accommodate editing and podcasting capabilities, but it does. So you can package shit, but if you once you unopen it and if it's still shit, then the product will not sell, like many other companies have figured out. Apple kind of consistently backs their marketing with great
That's true,
product
but they
design, which
charge
is
a
what.
ridiculous premium for it, right? The
Yeah,
only reason I
that's
have
true.
this is somebody's given whatever. It's a
Mm.
I wouldn't buy this with my own money. I wouldn't,
Yeah.
right? I have
Ah,
this fundamental principle disagreement. I would never willingly pay out of pocket to buy an Apple. I will never, veer from that.
we have
Abhin, I
been
know you're
having this
smiling. Your
conversation for
entire
12
family.
years.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
no,
we've been
we've been
having this
having this
conversation.
conversation for a very. I'm not smiling because of my. Smiling because I have known Rohit for like almost 15, 16 years at this point. We have been
Yeah.
having this conversation for as long as we've known each other.
Yeah. So this is like a belief I've held, like Abhin said, for over 15 years now. So the last point I want to make is what I will give Jobs credit for. I think he had the ability or the knack to recognize either a great idea or recognize somebody who, like this guy, can come up with, or this person can come up with the next big thing. He had the ability to
Mhm.
recognize great talent or a great idea. I think he had a great, what do you call it, gut feeling. Ironic that he died of pancreatic cancer though, but I think he had a great gut. uh,
Ah,
or maybe it was more
ah.
like the pancreas of Dorian Gray, right? All those
Okay,
great
enough,
gut
enough, enough,
calls
enough. Yeah,
had
enough.
to come from somewhere.
Pancreas of Darwin. Okay, no more Steve Jobs talk. Otherwise, it's going to turn into another Steve Jobs episode. We have the Four Lions episode and the Steve Jobs episode all wrapped up in one. But
Yeah.
yes, Rohit, let's move on to your final film of the three.
Right. So the next movie I want to talk about is 2015's Eye in the Sky. Again, a British film directed by Gavin Hood, starring Helen Mirren, starring Alan Rickman in what is, if I'm not mistaken, his last film role, or the last movie he shot for, at least. Starring Aaron Paul and a bunch of others. So the premise of the movie is it has three main geographical locations that you need to worry about, right? So the primary location is in Somalia, where the story is that your Boko Haram-esque, I don't think they call them out as Boko Haram, but these fundamentalist Islamist organizations are essentially running this town. And there is supposed to be like a meeting of bigwigs in this one house that both British and American intelligence have been scoping out for a while. You are introduced to this family that lives right next door to this house, to this safe house, which has a mom, dad, and a very charming little girl who helps their parents by selling the bread that they make at home, and they show her innocent side. She loves hula hooping and she goes to school, and they spend enough time trying, establishing the fact that there's this nice little family that just so happens to live next door to the safe house. So that's one situation. The other situation is in London. You have what is essentially MI6 slash military intelligence, who is, like I said, working with American drone pilots to scope out this house, and they have intelligence about this meeting that's going to take place, and then they need to figure out how can they use the situation to cut off the head of the snake, right? How can we destabilize Boko Haram leadership? I'm going to call them Boko Haram, although they don't.
Okay.
And the third situation is here in the USA, you have Aaron Paul and I'm forgetting this other female who are drone pilots, and they are essentially the trigger, right? So when they are told, they are the ones who are going to fire missiles from the drone onto that house if needed to take out the top leadership. So this premise is set in the first 10 minutes of the film, and the rest of the whatever 2 hour-ish runtime of the movie is essentially in real time, right?
Yeah.
So they get to know, okay, this meeting that we had gotten intelligence about is happening. It's going down in the next half an hour, and then it gets into the nitty gritties of what goes into sanctioning an attack, right? Because any attack, you can't really pinpoint its damage to the radius that you want. The movie establishes that there's always going to be some collateral damage, right? And then it gets into the moral conundrum of how much collateral damage is justifiable because we are killing people that would otherwise have killed or sanctioned the killing of thousands of other more people. So it gets into the conundrums of that. Real time back and forth happens. Helen Mirren's character plays a colonel who is overseeing the whole operation, and she's very pragmatic. She's like, hey, if this family of innocents dies as collateral, especially that girl who is selling bread right outside the safe house, right? And Helen Mirren's character is like, if she dies, in the words of Ivan Drago, right?
If he dies, he dies.
I'm sorry for taking you out of the situation, but that's the call essentially that her character has to make. And Helen Mirren is very pragmatic about it. Alan Rickman plays her superior who has to uh, sign off on the drone strike, uh, and yet he is also answerable to some politicians. And there's this whole angle of who bells the cat, right? If news comes out of, hey, we killed innocents in while we while this attack went down, who's going to be holding that bag of shit at the end, right? Where does the buck stop? And there's a whole wonderful dynamic of these politicians just passing the responsibility to each other, saying, hey, this is not for X and Y reason, I am not the one that can take this call, it has to be you. And the other politician is like, no, but as per this statute, I can't take this call. So nobody really wants to bell the cat.
Bella Cat.
There's that dynamic as well. I don't know if my description is making it sound right, but the movie is super riveting, right? What makes it fascinating is all of these very heavy concepts are being navigated and decided upon in real time. What would ordinarily be like this very lengthy discussion, of like intellectuals sitting around a table debating the theoretical whatever, the theory of it. You're like, hey, practical
Consequences of
application,
it. Yeah.
10 minutes, what's
Yeah.
happening? Outstanding screenplay, great performances all around. The ending, I would say, is where they don't drop the ball, but if like the rest of the movie is a 9, the ending is a 7 or an 8. I don't think they stick the last bit of
Landing.
exactly, they don't stick the landing as in the sense the last bit of the message, uh, where Alan Rickman's trying to say we always know the cost of the decisions we make, and don't ever think we do. That felt a little bit hollow to me, but up until that point, the movie is outstanding. I don't know why it didn't, why more people don't talk about it, but it is an insanely good movie.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of my dad's favorite films of the last decade. He talks about this movie a lot. He saw it very recently. I think he saw it on Netflix at some point. Because around
On Amazon
2015, when this
Prime,
movie,
if I'm not mistaken.
yeah,
I saw it very
one of those,
recently as
yes.
well.
And like this is a film I haven't seen, even though I know a lot about it. I remember the whole fact about it, about the sequences taking place in real time, about the attention it was getting, and then it also happened to coincide with Alan Rickman's death. So it's people. This is a film that keeps cropping up in conversations every year, and they keep talking about how impactful it is and how you take the theoretical consequences of people discussing, oh, this is what happens if you detonate a bomb to take out an evil but kill innocents instead. And I think the execution of it is what makes people keep going back to this film on a repeated basis.
Yeah, I remember this term you'd use, one sock movie.
Yeah.
Something similar was the case for me, right? I remember I started watching this movie. I was taking a break from work, and around 4:15 is when I have my evening snack and coffee. So like I'll start watching it on my phone, and I'll watch it in parts. A lot of times now I don't get like these stretches of 2 hours. I break a
Mhm.
movie down into parts and watch it. But I watched those 15 minutes on my phone, and once the movie kicked off, I was like, is any of the work that I have urgent? Because I need to know what happens. And I shifted it from the phone to my projector. I put it on screen, and I remember Poonam came back from work. She's like, isn't it a Tuesday? I was like, yeah, but you need to watch this. Come, I'll tell you what's happened so far. It's insane. So it was like that, right? I forgot what I was doing and I just like really got absorbed.
Cool. So this is a film I need to check out. It's been on my list for a very long time.
It's on
Now
Amazon
I should
Prime. Yeah.
should go find it. Okay. Let's move on to the last film on this list, which is mine. And this is a film I watched last year, and I repeatedly go. I don't sit through the entirety of it, but I watch it in bits. Like much like you said, time has been a bit of a constraint over the last couple of months or in the last year or so. So, and this film is long. This is 2021's Oscar-winning Drive My Car, directed by Ryusuke Hamaguchi. The film is 3 hours long. I think it's adapted from a Haruki Murakami shorts collection called Men Without Women. I could be wrong. It tells the story of this guy called Yusuke Kafuku, who is married to this television writer slash actor, and she has a habit of going into a trance after they sleep together and narrating stories to him. And that's something of a bond that they've formed after a particular tragic incident that has happened in their past. She also records lines for him to practice as he drives to and fro from work because he's an actor. So whenever he has to practice his lines, she has the entire script down on cassette tapes, and which he listens to while he drives to work. And then something unfortunate happens. The rest of the film is basically a deep dive, a very quiet, contemplative deep dive into what grief looks like in different people. There's nothing about this movie that is loud, boisterous. As a matter of fact, not a lot of things happen in the film, but it's what is constantly bubbling underneath the surface that really is riveting to watch. Remember watching this the first time and just thinking to myself, wow, it I don't do a lot of meditative cinema. I don't like cinema that slows down and takes its time. But I found myself drawn to this film in a way I couldn't quite explain. Like this movie is bonkers. They dropped the credits 40 minutes into the film. Like zero fucks given. The prologue is 40 minutes long. And so much of it is just about the main character being asked to go. He goes to Hiroshima to direct a play for a festival, and the play plays a huge part, which is Anton Chekhov's Uncle Vanya. And a lot of what is happening in the play mirrors what is happening to him in real life, how he's processing grief, how he is kind of essentially shut himself off. And it's it's a very interesting look at how people react to grief, and how some people are loud, boisterous, and some people get quiet and contemplative and kind of just close themselves off from society because they don't want to feel that kind of pain again. There's a lot of regret that he's living with. And he meets his driver. They appoint him a driver because he's getting glaucoma in one eye, and because the insurance companies will not allow him to drive as long as he's employed by the festival, they employ this woman who drives him to and fro from his residence to the theater every day. And she has her own bag of grief. There's no love story or anything here. It's just two people coming together and in a bit to heal.
Sounds very Murakami.
Yeah. It has one of, I think Coda it came out the same as Coda did, and Coda won the Oscar for Best Picture. And Coda has that really nice sequence at the end where she is signing to both sides now so that her parents can see it. There is a sequence in this film, and I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it, where where he hires a deaf actress to portray a certain character in Uncle Vanya, and she steals the film in the last 20 minutes because she has this whole monologue about living with pain and how to process it, and how we will and how all we can do is continue to exist through the rest of our days. And it is told in pure silence. There isn't a line. It's just her acting with Yusuke Kafku sitting next to her or sitting in front of her. One of the standout moments in recent cinema. I so much so that I went and checked Hamaguchi's other work. He has another movie called Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy, which is 4 hours long. This man doesn't like to end it. So it's, but this film is one of my favorites. The soundtrack is beautiful. Everything about this film is what you need if you're looking for a movie to really just take your time with. It's not everyone's cup of tea. I have mentioned this repeatedly to people. This is not a film that a lot of people will enjoy. Like, it takes its time. It takes its time in setting things up. There's not a lot happening, but a lot of this film, a lot of things are said in this movie without actually being said. And I think that's the greatest compliment I can give a film and its director.
I mean to get around to watching it at some point, but there's two things, right? One is given what I'm on the work side, given there's enough ambiguity and stress, I'm generally keeping away from very heavy films. Like, I want cinema to be a means of escape in the limited time that I get to indulge in it, right? So generally,
Understandable.
I've cut down on like serious cinema, and the other part of the Venn diagram being very slow cinema. I think I'm just getting older, right? So I get tired sooner, and late night, whatever, watching cinemas at night, the propensity for me to fall asleep has increased dramatically in the last 5 years.
Yeah,
So
understandably. Yeah,
the
no, and
combination of
this
the
is
two,
not a
I've just
movie.
never. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So the combination of the
this
two,
is
I've
not a
just never.
movie I
Correct.
would watch in the night. I watch it over a weekend, and I had to watch it. The first time I watched it all the way through, but ever since then I kind of split it because it's time is of the essence. I fully get where you're coming from.
Yeah, so that's probably the reason I haven't gotten around to it. But I'm just generally not just fascinated by Japan, not just fascinated by the Japanese cinematic industry or Japanese industry, film industry, but Japan as a nation, right? Because the other part being more so than cinema, just to give you guys some background, last maybe couple of years or so, I've spent a lot more time listening to podcasts because you can do that along with work or whatever, right? So, and I listen to a lot of history podcasts. A lot of it has been uh, Japan focused or Japanese centric. It just, there's a lot. So I feel as a nation, there are, like we say about India, right? There are a lot of Indias within India. I also feel there are a lot of Japans within Japan, right? Because you have, there's to some degree, you have remnants of that feudal mindset, the whole Bushido culture. You have the hypermodern Japan. You have the rural, quiet Japan. There's a lot of facets that maybe sitting here, not knowing enough about the country, the air of mystery that leads to just makes the country very alluring to me. Right? I want to know more, which is I'm always like, hey, Japanese film, not so much Japanese food. As a vegetarian, there's jack shit for us to eat. But generally, I'm like allured by Japan. So for that reason, if nothing else, I will probably give this a watch over a quiet, contemplative weekend. I don't know when I'm going to get
Yeah,
that, but I should.
definitely. I think it's a movie that I would recommend watching with your partner as well because I feel uh, this is a film that you both can enjoy. It may not be easy to recommend because if you're this is a whole other topic for another episode. But if you guys want to have uh, a nice conversation about what you took away from the film, this is one of those kind of movies.
But what to do if your partner has the attention span of a meerkat or a goldfish?
Yeah, then this is probably not it.
You know, Poonam. So.
I know Poonam. Rohit, what is happening? Rohit, I know Poonam. And,
but
yeah, but yeah,
but yeah, great. I think this is I think is a good mix of movies that we like that we'd want people to watch. Also, the last point you mentioned is a decent enough segue for us to give a teaser about what will probably be the next episode we're recording, or the next to next
one of the
episode.
one of the next the one of it's coming soon. We have like a
Yeah, and one
Valentine's
of
Day
the
episode.
rare few instances where we kind of know what we want to record next. So what I'm
Yes,
talking about is movies that we want to show our partner because we really love the movies and we've just failed to make them watch it through. Very
yeah,
specific topic, but we have enough to populate the list, right? So we're going to talk
yeah.
about that.
That'll be a fun episode. That'll be something you can go
It's our
share with
take
your
on
partner as well.
Valentine's Day.
Exactly. I will not talk about Gary Marshall's Valentine's Day on Valentine's Day. I am not that person. But yes, that's us. We'll see you on the next one. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Take care. Have a good one.
Bye bye.